It started out as just another day, or so I thought. My name is Sarah, and for years I believed my life was solid, built on trust and a love that couldn't be shaken. My husband James and I had been together for 8 years. To the outside world, we were that perfect couple, the ones friends admired and strangers envied. We laughed together, shared dreams, and held on to promises I thought would never break. But in a single moment, everything changed. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, one of those days where nothing feels out of the ordinary. I was at a family gathering, James's side of the family to be precise. He looked distracted all day, barely speaking to me. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just tired, I thought, but there was something strange in the way he moved, like he was carrying a secret no one else could see. Then, when I went to the bathroom to freshen up, I noticed it, the faint sound of whispering just outside the door. My heart stopped for a second, and I stood frozen. I could recognize that voice anywhere. It was James. But what shook me to my core was the other voice. It was soft, teasing, and unmistakably familiar. His co-worker, Claire. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear every word. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Claire whispered, her voice laced with excitement and urgency. James's reply came low and hushed. Just hold on. We'll figure it out. Every word hit me like a punch to the stomach. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't wrap my head around it. James? Claire? How could he do this to me? How could he betray everything we had built? I needed answers, and I needed them now. But as I yanked the door open, what I saw in those next few moments changed my life forever. Everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust vanished in an instant. And the worst part? That was only the beginning. When I yanked that bathroom door open, I half expected to see them standing there together, caught in the middle of something they couldn't explain. But the hallway was empty, as if they had disappeared into thin air. My chest felt tight, and my legs wobbled as I stepped out, scanning the room for any sign of James or Claire. I couldn't shake off the sound of their voices, still echoing in my mind. I knew I had to act normal so no one would suspect the storm raging inside me. I made my way back to the living room, forcing a smile and pretending everything was fine. People were laughing, talking, and carrying on as if nothing had happened. But my eyes were searching for James. I finally spotted him, standing by the patio door with Claire. She laughed softly at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm just for a second. That was all it took for my stomach to drop. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. I knew there was something real between them. As I watched them, I couldn't help but think back to when James first mentioned Claire. It was about a year ago. "She's just started at the office," he had said casually. "She's young, a little naive, but a hard worker." At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I trusted James. I trusted us. Looking back now, all the late nights at work, the sudden business trips, and the mysterious phone calls started to make sense. How could I have been so blind? The more I watched them, the more I realized how deep this betrayal went. My mind raced with questions. Was I the last to know? Had everyone else figured it out while I lived in oblivion? But more importantly, how long had this been going on? I wanted to confront him right then and there, to scream and demand the truth. But something held me back. I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. I couldn't let emotions cloud my judgment. So I decided to wait and watch. I would uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And deep down, I knew that once I did, there would be no going back. That night, after we got home, the silence in the car was unbearable. James acted normal, like nothing had happened, humming softly to the radio as he drove. I sat there staring out the window, replaying every moment from the day. I wanted to scream, to ask him what was really going on, but I bit my tongue. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it. I knew James. He was always calm under pressure, quick with words that could make anyone second guess themselves. I needed him to slip up, to reveal the truth himself. Once we were inside, he tossed his keys on the counter and smiled at me. "You okay? You've been quiet." His voice was smooth, almost too smooth. For a second, I wondered if I was overreacting, if I had imagined everything. But then I remembered Claire's voice in the hallway and the way she touched him. The knot in my stomach tightened. "I'm fine," I muttered, forcing a weak smile. I watched him carefully as he walked into the kitchen and poured himself a drink. It was so infuriating how relaxed he seemed, how easily he carried on. Did he not feel even a shred of guilt? Or was he that good at hiding it? Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention to James's behavior. Little things I had ignored before suddenly seemed obvious. He kept his phone closer than ever, always face down on the table. His late nights at the office became more frequent, and he was suddenly showering at odd times, something he never used to do. My mind spiraled with thoughts of Claire. Was she the reason for all of this? Was she waiting for him somewhere, sharing stolen moments while I sat at home like a fool? One evening, I decided to do something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I checked his phone. My hand shook as I held it, my pulse racing. His passcode hadn't changed, and I swallowed the lump in my throat as I opened his messages. Most of them looked normal, the usual exchanges with friends and work colleagues. But then I saw her name, Claire. I clicked the thread, my heart pounding. The messages weren't obvious, nothing incriminating at first glance. But as I scrolled, I noticed their tone. Inside jokes, late-night work chats, and texts that didn't sound professional at all. One message stopped me cold. "I can't wait to see you again. Last time wasn't enough." The words blurred as I stared at the screen, my head spinning. I felt sick. My worst fears were no longer just fears. They were real, and now that I knew, I couldn't unsee it. James had no idea that I was on to him, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. I was going to find out just how far this went, no matter the cost. For the next few days, I pretended nothing had changed. I acted like everything was fine, like my heart wasn't breaking into 1,000 pieces every time I saw James smile at me. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. I had to be smart, patient. If I confronted him now, he'd lie, and I'd be left with nothing but more questions. But as the days dragged on, the tension in the house grew unbearable. James was becoming more distant, and I was becoming more consumed by the need to know. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Every little thing felt like a clue. His late nights at the office, the way his tone changed when Claire's name came up in conversation. He was slipping, and I knew it. But what I didn't know was just how deep this went. Then, one evening, everything took a turn. James had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower. I could hear the water running, and my heart raced. I knew this was my chance, the one I'd been waiting for. I had to know what they were really up to. I picked up his phone again, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. This time, I scrolled back further, desperate for more answers. My eyes were glued to the screen, reading each message, trying to make sense of the words. And then I found it. An address. The message was simple. "Meet me at my place tonight. I'll be waiting." I froze. The message wasn't for me. It was for Claire. And the address. It was clear. James was planning to meet her, to be with her. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, It was something much deeper, something more painful than I could have ever imagined. I had to act fast. I couldn't just let him walk out the door that night. I knew the next few hours would change everything, but I couldn't let this moment slip away. The decision to confront him, to demand the truth, was weighing on me with every passing second. If I did it now, there would be no going back. I would either have the answers I needed, or I'd be left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. As the sound of the shower stopped, my heart pounded louder. I had mere minutes to decide how this was going to end. Would I walk away, or would I finally face the truth? The sound of the water shutting off sent a shiver down my spine. James was about to walk into the living room, completely unaware that I now knew his secret. The house felt suffocating. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Should I confront him now? Should I wait for him to leave, follow him, and catch him in the act? But deep down, I knew I couldn't just sit back any longer. I had to know for my own peace of mind. I quickly set the phone down and turned to face the hallway, trying to steady my breathing. The next few minutes felt like hours. James appeared, wrapped in a towel, his hair dripping wet. He smiled at me casually, as if everything was normal. "Hey, babe," he said, walking toward the kitchen to grab a drink. His nonchalance made my stomach churn. How could he be this calm when everything between us was crumbling? "James," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He turned, giving me a confused look. "We need to talk." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just nodded, setting his glass down on the counter. "What's going on? You seem different tonight." I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to start a fight, but there was no turning back now. "I know about Claire. I know about your meetings, your texts, everything." His face froze. For a split second, I saw a flash of panic in his eyes before he quickly masked it with a calm expression. "What are you talking about?" I could feel my pulse rising, the anger and hurt spilling out of me. "I saw the messages, the address. You were planning to meet her tonight, weren't you?" James stood still, silent. The air between us grew heavy, and I could tell he was struggling with his words. For a moment, I thought he might deny it, but then he did something unexpected. He sighed deeply and sat down at the kitchen table, running a hand through his wet hair. "Sarah, you don't understand." I was beyond confused. Was he about to admit everything? Or was this some half-hearted attempt to dodge the truth? "I never meant for you to find out this way," he continued, his voice softer now. "But it's not what you think. I wasn't meeting her. I was meeting someone else. Someone else entirely." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What was he saying? "What do you mean, someone else?" James looked down, then met my eyes, a deep sadness clouding his face. "I've been seeing someone, but it's not Claire. It's someone from my past, someone I never wanted to tell you about because I knew it would hurt you, someone I thought was long gone." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. First Claire, now another mystery person. "Who? Who is it, James?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He stood up and turned away from me, pacing back and forth. "It's someone I knew before I met you, someone I never stopped caring about. But Sarah, I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep it all separate, keep you safe from all of this." My head was spinning. What was happening? The whole situation felt like a bad dream, but every word James said was real. Another woman? Another betrayal? But how much of it was true? Could I trust anything he said now? I didn't know what to think, what to believe. Was this just another lie, another excuse to cover up his real affair with Claire? Or was there someone else entirely that I didn't even know about? Someone who had been pulling the strings all along? The questions kept swirling, but one thing was clear. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was wrong. The life I had built with James was unraveling, and I was no closer to finding out the whole truth. The deeper I dug, the more layers there were to uncover. And just as I was about to ask him one more question, the doorbell rang. It was too much, too many unanswered questions, too much tension. Who could be at the door? Was it Claire? Was it the mystery woman? Or was this yet another twist in a story that had only just begun? The doorbell rang again, louder this time. My heart raced in my chest. I looked at James, who was still pacing, and then back at the door. He seemed caught off guard, too, as if he hadn't expected anyone. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, I walked toward the door, my mind racing with questions. Who could it be? Was it Claire? Or maybe the woman James had been seeing? I opened the door, and standing there was a tall woman I didn't recognize. She was holding a small box, her expression serious. Before I could speak, she handed me the box. "For Sarah," she said simply, her voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. "Who are you?" I asked, confused and still processing everything that had been happening in the last few minutes. The woman paused for a moment, then took a step back, her gaze shifting to James, who was now standing behind me in the hallway. "I think you need to talk to him," she said quietly, before turning and walking away, disappearing down the street as quickly as she had appeared. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the box in my hands. The knot in my stomach tightened. James walked up beside me and looked down at the package, his face pale. "You need to open it," he said, his voice strangely distant. I slowly opened the box, my hands trembling. Inside was a folder with several papers and a single photograph. I pulled it out, and my heart stopped. The picture was of James and the woman he'd been seeing, but there was something else. Behind them, in the background, was me. It was a picture of me at a family gathering, my face, my smile, captured in the frame of their photo. My breath caught in my throat as I read the note attached. "You thought you knew everything, but you don't. You're the one who's been kept in the dark." Confusion and anger flooded my mind. What was this? Who was behind all of this? I looked up at James, my eyes wide with disbelief. "What is this? Why are you involved in this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury and fear. James opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He looked down, and for the first time, I saw true regret in his eyes. "Sarah, I didn't know what to say," he whispered. "It's not just one woman. There's something bigger here, something I didn't know how to explain." Before I could process his words, another knock came at the door. I turned, feeling the ground beneath me shift once again. This time, a man stood at the threshold, holding up his phone. "You're gonna want to see this," he said, as he showed me a video of James, not just with Claire or the other woman, but with someone I knew, someone I never expected. It was my own sister. Everything I thought I understood about my life, my marriage, and the people I trusted had been turned upside down in an instant. The truth was darker, more twisted than I could have imagined. And as the video played, I felt everything I knew about love, trust, and loyalty disintegrate before my eyes. The video played in a loop on the man's phone, showing James and my sister in a hotel room, laughing and talking, much too familiar with each other. I felt my legs go weak as the truth sank in. My sister, my own sister. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. I thought I knew my life, my marriage, but this was something else entirely. I turned to James, my face flushed with shock and disbelief. "Why? How could you?" My voice was barely above a whisper, the hurt too deep for words. James looked shattered, as if he had lost all the strength he had been clinging to. I never meant for you to find out like this, Sarah. I never meant for it to go this far. His voice was filled with regret, but it didn't matter anymore. The trust was gone. Everything we had built felt like a lie. I trusted you, I said, the tears finally coming, burning down my cheeks. And I trusted her too. James reached out, but I stepped back, shaking my head. I needed space, time to process what had happened, to figure out how I was going to move forward. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic mess. My sister, the woman who had always been by my side, had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I turned and walked out, leaving James and the mess we had created behind. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally come to light. Now it was up to me to rebuild, not just my marriage, but my trust in the people I loved. I didn't know where I would go from here, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let anyone define my future anymore. And as I walked away from that life, I realized that sometimes the only way to find yourself is to lose everything.